Hello, everybody, and welcome to episode 2 of ScholAceStic, a podcast where I help you ace your scholastic pursuits. Today, I'm going to discuss a concept called sanctity of space, and how it's important for crushing your study goals and maintaining a healthy work-life balance. Let's get into it. So, what is sanctity of space? This is a phrase I first heard from the YouTuber Unjaded Jade. It means reserving or dedicating certain spaces to specific tasks. For example, always working on your homework in the school library or making sure that your bedroom is used specifically for relaxing and sleeping rather than working. Unjaded Jade does a great job of explaining this concept in greater detail, and I would highly recommend checking out her videos. They're beautiful, raw, aesthetic, and very wholesome. I'm going to focus on the importance of sanctity of space and what you can do to achieve it. Why is it important to dedicate certain spaces to certain areas of your life? I think a common experience for many of us during quarantine was using our house, and sometimes even just our bedrooms, as our workspace. Workout space, relaxing space, sleeping space, etc. The physical boundaries that ordinarily compartmentalized different parts of our lives were gone. We couldn't just go to work in the morning, do our work there, then come home to our house and let work stuff stay at work. As a result, it was hard, at least for me, to turn off the quote-unquote school or quote-unquote work part of my brain so I could relax. Additionally, all my courses were online, and you had the option to work ahead in a lot of them. I ended up completely running myself into the ground with work because I had no concept anymore of what was enough or what was meant to be done for the day. What could have helped me at that time? Sanctity of space. Now, I said that sanctity of space has to do with physical boundaries like leaving work and therefore symbolically leaving everything work-related behind you to be picked up again the next time you come into work. However, when physical boundaries aren't necessarily an option, you can also set mental boundaries too. As an example, I do a lot of work in my room, as it's the one place in my house where I can get peace and quiet. However, I also take time to relax in my room. So, how do I signal to myself that it's time to relax rather than work? There are a few ways I do that. Firstly, I set time boundaries for myself. Since I'm not in school at the moment, but I'm still working on various projects, I make sure that when it hits 5 p.m., I'm done with work. When I was in school, I made sure that unless something was urgent, I stopped working at 8 p.m. and got ready for bed. If you struggle with time blindness, you can try setting timers and alarms for yourself to make sure you stop working when you're supposed to. You can also set a boundary for ending work by saying, once I finish X, then I'm turning off my electronics for the night and relaxing. As an example, while I was in school, I made a list of every assignment I needed to work on for a given day, and when I got done with the last assignment on my list, I stopped working for the night. In all fairness, this last example takes a bit of discipline, but it was something I quickly learned to do after experiencing some severe burnout in my first year of college. For me, the motivation to not crash and burn again was enough to get me to stop working for the night. Something else I like to do to maintain sanctity of space, even within my own room, is set aside certain spaces within my room for certain activities. As an example, my bed is strictly for relaxing and sleeping. I sit in bed before I go to sleep at night, and I sit in bed for a little while when I'm first waking up in the morning. I make sure I never have my laptop with me when I'm in bed, because that will just encourage me to work when I should be relaxing, or vice versa. I'm lucky enough to have a spacious desk in my room, so I make sure that all the work I do is strictly at my desk. I also use cues to create mental sanctity of space. In the evening, when I need to be relaxing and getting ready to go to bed, I keep the bright overhead lights off in my room and only use a warm-toned desk lamp to dimly illuminate the space. I also have my blue light filters on all my devices set to turn on at least 3 hours before I typically go to bed so that I'm not constantly flooding my brain with blue light and staving off the production of melatonin until much later. When I'm working at my desk, I also have a special keyboard separate from my laptop. During the day and during working hours, I have the RGB lights on because it makes work more fun. When it's later in the evening and the goal is relaxing or doing enjoyable work rather than work or schoolwork, I have that turned off, again, to limit my exposure to intense light closer to bedtime. Now that we are, thankfully, out of quarantine and back in the world, I definitely use physical sanctity of space to cue my brain when it's time to work and time to relax, but mental sanctity of space has remained just as important. For example, when I was in school, I made sure that my commute to and from school was purely about enjoyment. I tried not to think about what I had to do that day, I just listened to the radio and enjoyed the ride. In that way, my car was set aside strictly as a relaxing in-between space that would either psych me up for my day or help me unwind before I got home. I also had specific study spots within the school where I preferred to work, and I knew that when I sat down in any of those study spots that my goal was to get things done. Mentally, I maintained sanctity of space by deciding that whatever happened at school on my commute stayed there and didn't follow me home. For example, I almost got into a car accident on my way to school one day. Sure, it was jarring and upsetting, but I didn't want it to ruin my day, so I made the conscious decision to sit in my car once I was safely in the parking lot, take a few deep breaths, and release it. There was no accident. There was nothing more I could do to change the situation, and it wasn't the kind of energy I wanted to bring with me into my day. So, I very consciously decided that moment was going to stay exactly where it was in the past. I calmed down, I carried on with my day, and more or less forgot all about the incident. As another example, say I had an unfavorable interaction with a professor that day. Instead of letting that sour me for the rest of the day, I would mentally leave that baggage back in the spot I had the interaction with them. One way my therapist described this sort of mental unloading was with a tree. My therapist said that we can symbolically leave behind our baggage either fully or temporarily in a certain spot. As an example, if an ER doctor always passes a certain tree on his commute home from work, he can decide that he doesn't want to bring the stress of his job home with him, and he can mentally bury all his problems beneath that tree, and he can choose to pick them up the next day on his way back to work. I've used something very similar to this in my own life, and I find it very helpful for maintaining mental clarity and ensuring that you don't carry baggage from one part of your life into the mental space of another part of your life. Sanctity of space can also refer to subdivisions of physical or digital spaces that compartmentalize aspects of your life so that you can mentally shift from work to relaxing or vice versa. As another example, there was a while in college that I didn't end up buying a yearly planner, so I used a bullet journal instead. The bullet journal was used specifically as my planner with monthly and weekly spreads. I didn't use the journal for anything else. I didn't doodle in it, I didn't journal, I didn't write down miscellaneous information. I used the journal strictly for planning purposes. I do something similar with my digital spaces. I have folders dedicated strictly to school stuff, sometimes with several subfolders to make sure everything is orderly and easy to find. I make sure that my school stuff always goes into and stays in my school folder. That way, when I open up my File Explorer to resume a creative writing project, just for leisure purposes, I'm not bombarded with 1,000 reasons why I should be working ahead on school stuff. Ultimately, sanctity of space boils down to creating physical, digital, mental, and emotional boundaries to ensure a separation of work from leisure so that you can fully engage in whichever you're doing at the moment. I've personally found that it's improved my quality of life since I implemented it, and if you don't already do something similar, I highly recommend testing it out and seeing how it can change your life. I hope you enjoyed this episode of ScholAceStic. In the next episode, I will discuss my study essentials, and maybe some fun things that aren't strictly necessary, but certainly make work and studying better. Work hard, take care, and I'll talk to you in the next episode of ScholAceStic.